This week on the Destination Angler.
As I got into the night fishing game, on some rivers, the big stoneflies come off, and I have a stonefly pattern that I use that is deadly. And then, a lot of people fish at night and they think of the mouse patterns, but I found out lots of times that the big fish, the ones that are as long as your leg, they'll come up on occasion, but 90% of the time, if you want the real heavyweights, you go down after them.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Hey listeners, welcome back to episode 2 with the one and only Joe Humphreys. In case you missed it, be sure to backcast to catch episode 1 with Joe as he shares from a lifetime of fishing adventures on his home waters, Spring Creek in central Pennsylvania. Our show today is brought to you by J.P. Ross Fly Rods, makers of happiness, one fly rod at a time. Get outside and simply fish. And by Adventure On, your online source for fly fishing gear. You can join in the conversation on Instagram and the Destination Angler Connection on Facebook, where we post a ton of pictures on the destinations we feature and the top flies our experts recommend. Coming up on the Destination Angler, we're headed to Craig, Montana in the Mighty Mo for some of the best trout fishing in the lower 48 with the 5-time spey casting champion and fishing guide, Whitney Gould. Then we head back east to the great state of Maine and the west branch of the Penobscot River for trophy landlocked salmon and brook trout. Today our destination is Spring Creek, where we take a deep dive into the mind of Joe Humphreys, where he explains things like the night fishing game, fly selection, and why trout fishing is a thinking man's game. He also shares how the documentary on his life, Live the Stream, came about and how a book on fly fishing saved him as a troubled youth. Now in his 90s, Joe is a national treasure, having taught fly fishing to thousands, guided presidents and celebrities, and traveled the world representing the USA in fly fishing competitions. But most of all, Joe is just one heck of a nice guy and has a knack for making everyone around him feel downright special. A master storyteller. Stick around to the very end to hear a great one, and I'll give you a hint. It involves a cow and a backcast. So sit back, pull up a chair, and let's listen in to Fireside Chat number 2 with the one and only Joe Humphreys.
I was doing a show one time in South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina. I was doing it for a fly shop called the Foothills Fly Shop. They're no longer in business. That was a long time ago. So, but anyhow, this was a big day, a Saturday, and all these people were coming and to watch me cast and do my thing. And so the parents brought their little boy, and he was a 10-year-old, and they said, we came here to have you sign my little boy's ball hat. And I said, oh, that's nice. And so I signed his ball hat. And then after I signed his ball hat, he started to tell me that how good he was. And he said that he could outfish anybody his own age, but then he could outfish adults, and then he could catch more fish than anybody. And then finally I said, you're going to be so good, you're going to take my job, and then what will I do? And he says, well, you can always sign ball hats. so
That's great.
So, right off the cuff. Well,
pretty obvious.
You can always sign ball hats. These kids, there's such a pleasure to be around, and
That's funny.
And they're so with it. They're so sharp. So yeah,
that's funny. All right, so Joe, shifting gears for a minute, I got to ask you about the movie. I say the movie for everybody listening at home. Live the Stream is a fantastic movie. I think I've watched it 3 times now. It came out just a year or 2 ago. And it's all about Joe and his, what he's all about on the stream and teaching, all the things we've been talking about. And Joe, I am curious, how did that movie come about and why did you agree to make it?
Well, this is what happened. Lucas, the gentleman that come up with this idea, and his wife, Megan, he was in a class at Penn State. And he was doing a film for this class. It was in communications class, and he was doing a film, and he called it Penn State Fly Fishing. And so he asked me if I would. His name was Lucas Bell, and he asked me, "Would you help me with this?" And I said, well, sure, anything I can do, because then I was in charge of the angling program. And so I helped him, and I gave him some tips, and I gave him equipment, some stuff to work with, and so he did a heck of a nice job. He had some really clever ideas with filming, insofar as graphics and really stuff coming in and out and dissolving, and I was really impressed. I said, "Geez," I said, and he gave me the film, a copy.
Oh, okay.
And so many years later, I'm doing a show in Lancaster, and it was one of the big fly fishing shows, and I was doing a book signing at the time, and he showed up and said, my wife and I are starting we have a film company where it's Nomadic Films, and we're producing a film, and we want our first film to be with you. He said, would you agree to be our subject? And I said, yeah, that was an honor. I said, certainly I would be. And so it started from there. And so that's how Live the Stream started.
Okay.
And so 2.5 years later, we finished the film, and it was a wonderful experience.
Okay. I noticed it was filmed over a couple of years. That's interesting. And one of the things I thought was really fun to watch, Joe, was maybe the opening scene. You're crawling through the brush, and I'm thinking, this guy is like late 80s, and he's crawling around through the brush, and you're doing a little cast back in this brush, and you catch, I don't know, a 6-inch brook trout, and you are just amazed at this brook trout. And tell me about that. So you get excited about big fish, you get excited about little fish. What is it about even these little fish that gets you so excited?
Well, the fact is that the little brook trout, it's a native fish. This is, the good Lord put this little fish in our mountain streams for eons in time and thousands of years. And the fact that these little brook trout are in such precarious areas that it's overgrown, it's tough, that you have a canopy of rhododendron and hemlocks all around you. It's like trying to cast into a Coke bottle, and so it's very difficult. And so you have to adjust, and your casting, your leader, the rod length. There's a myriad of things you have to do to be successful. And then when you have success, and these fish may not be very big, an 8-inch fish might be a trophy in some streams. And so, but the fact that you caught the fish and you did what was necessary to catch that fish, that it's an exciting game, and it's to me, it's the epitome of the game. It's like, this is what you have to do if you want to be a Top Gun, and you really want to be the best you can be. Then, if you can master the brush, you're on your way.
That's interesting. And then the cameraman had to master the brush as well, I noticed.
He did.
In there.
He did a heck of a job. Yeah, you're crawling around, and it's not easy. No.
Were they kind of like shaking their head, like, where are we going today with Joe here? I think at the end of that, when you caught that little fish, I wrote it down. You said, "This is gold to me."
Yes, it's golden. It is gold.
Yeah, I agree. They're just beautiful fish.
But and I'm going to divert just a second.
Sure.
But we talk about spring creeks and our streams in Pennsylvania, and at one time, I'm thinking that, well, yeah, we have a lot of fish on Spring Creek, and then we have brown trout, and they'll once in a while drop a few golden trout in, palominos, the cross, and it's fishing, and once in a while they'll throw some brook trout in, but Spring Creek, when I was a kid, was brown trout. And so I was fishing one day and on Upper Spring Creek, and I'd fished till noon, and I just sat down on the bank, and I had a sandwich, and I was eating my sandwich, and an elderly man came down. He was fishing. And so he sat down beside me, and we chatted, and I said to him, I said, "Did you fish this stream when you were a boy?" And he said, "Yes, I did." And I said, "Did you catch some nice big brown trout then?" And he said, "No, son." He said, "There was only brook trout then." And he said, "There weren't any brown trout." And I said, "Brook trout?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, did you get any big ones?" "Well," he said, "yeah, once in a while we'd get a 2 or 3 pounder." Well, 2 or 3 pounds, now you're talking about fish that are 20 inches and bigger. And so that's a heck of a nice fish. And so then I was thinking about that. And where Bear Springs, the big spring I told you about earlier, where that dumped into Spring Creek, when I was a kid, that was where you caught your brook trout. And then down below that big spring, there was a whole series of pocket waters. And every pocket had a brook trout in it. And there were more brook trout in Spring Creek then than now, because of it's warmed up since I was a child. But then when I was thinking about that, and I was reading Theodore Gordon, and this was in 1890, and he was in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, with a gentleman that they fixed him up with, the local expert, and they were fishing below the dam in Spring Creek, and the dam was put in 2 years earlier. That was in 1888, and there was nothing but brook trout. And at the end of the day, the one gentleman, the expert, had 42 fish, but he had 43. And they killed them. They killed every damn fish. Every fish they caught, they killed.
Yeah.
But he was talking about the fly of the time. There was a little natural colored ginger type fly that they didn't know what it was, but it was probably either a caddis or it might have been a sulfur. But but if they didn't have the fly, they weren't catching the fish, type of thing.
Yeah.
And so, but I was thinking brook trout, nothing but brook trout. And so then, and then with other streams like Penns Creek, and we discussed this, you and I talked about it at one time, where Penns Creek had probably, I don't know what they had. It had where the Cold Springs came into it, and Big Springs, I'm sure that they had brook trout. But they had probably had bass. Who knows what was in that? But then they stocked Penns Creek by railroad. They had trout were brought over from Europe, the brown trout, and they had milk cans, and the railroad ran along Penns Creek, and so they dumped milk cans of brown trout in Penns Creek, and it became one of the best streams in the country.
Oh my gosh, from the railroad in cans.
So I was thinking about, as we're talking about the mountains and the brush and the brook trout, and then how Spring Creek was a brook trout fishery, and then how other streams were probably too. But as time goes on and they stock the brown trout, times have changed, and the brown trout have a tendency to push the brook trout out.
Yeah, exactly. Hey anglers, if you get excited about small stream fishing, then you need to know about JP Ross fly rods. If being outside nurtures your soul, if holding a fish of any size is like gold to you, if you believe that a fly rod should be a reflection of yourself and what you love, then you need to know about JP Ross fly rods. JP Ross produces many types of handmade fly rods, over 7,000 since 1997, but they are best known for their small stream collection and their passion for building relationships with their customers to help them be happy by being outside. I had a chance to fish one of these gems recently in Michigan and was blown away with its performance, beauty, and effortless casting. JP Ross himself was featured on my recent podcast on the Adirondacks, so check that out when you get a minute. And you can check out JP Ross Fly Rods at, you guessed it, jprossflyrods.com. Be sure to mention coupon code HAPPYFISH to receive $50 off any rod purchase. Like I always say, if you know how many fly rods you have, you don't have enough. So put a smile on your face and pick up a JP Ross fly rod before your next trip. Get outside and simply fish. Yeah, Joe, wanted to talk to us a little bit about the preservation work that you've done on Spring Creek.
Okay, Steve, years ago, the Thompson Run, which is one of the major spring feeders of Spring Creek, and which enhances Spring Creek to the great stream it is. That stream, that big spring, was the life of Spring Creek. And so what happened in the 50s, they reconstructed the highway and took that beautiful piece of spring water and they shoved it into what they called the duck pond, which was simply a pond for water coming out of State College. It was a holding pond for basically storm sewer runoff. And when that big spring went into that pond, it not only ruined the quality, but the temperature went crazy. And so Spring Creek died. It was started to go down with water temperatures going up into the high 70s and 80s, and there were trout kills, and it was awful. And I couldn't stand it. I thought that this stream was my life. It was my soul. It was my heart. And so I decided a gentleman from Penns Creek area of Lewistown, Pennsylvania, said, start a Trout Unlimited. Then maybe you can get something done. So I got a couple of guys, one Vance McCullough and Paul Blankenhorn were a couple of them that were really very helpful and wonderful guys. And there were 5 of us all together. I won't hit all the names here, but we pulled together and we started Trout Unlimited. And then I went to the university and I talked the gentleman at the physical plant into a project of diverting that beautiful spring back around the duck pond. And it happened. And we did it. And so now that big, beautiful spring, instead of going into the storm sewer runoff, it goes around and back into Spring Creek as it did centuries ago. So
good for you.
That's something that I'm very pleased about. And this next year, and it's going to start in May, they are going to do a complete reconstruction of that whole dike. And so that cold, clean water will never, ever go back into the storm sewer runoff area. So life is good.
That's great.
And I'm so excited about what has happened. Yes.
Something to look forward to, right?
You bet. Always something exciting to look forward to. You bet.
Yeah. And folks, there's a whole lot about this in the movie, the Live the Stream movie. So get a chance, get on your different streaming services and check that movie out. It's really a great movie. I noticed in the movie that you did a lot of bow and arrow casts, and I'm curious if you could talk about, when do you like to use the bow and arrow casts? And I noticed that instead of hanging onto the fly, you grab a whole bunch of line in your hand, so that bow and arrow cast becomes a much more effective cast because it's a longer cast that way. Is that right?
Well, yeah, there's different ways to do this, and the bow and arrow cast came out of necessity in the mountains. And so when I was a child, I would just grab the line and make a little bit of a bow and pop it. And that would to me, it was just a natural thing. It's something you did. And so as time went on, I found out that if I could loop the line and loop the leader and the line and catch it between 2 fingers, then my long fingers come over. And then I learned that to make a bow and arrow cast, it has to be your line, the hand holding the line and the hand on the rod. You have to be fist to fist. And because if you don't, then you don't have enough leverage on the rod tip to make the line go out.
I see.
So you have to, when you pull your line back and the fly back, you pull it back as far as you can possibly pull it, and then just open your fingers and let it go. And so I learned, and then I learned by accident. One time I was in a mountain stream and my line was coming back to me, and I got it in around a hemlock bough above me, and I just grabbed the line and pulled back and shot it, and I shot a roll cast. And George Harvey, when he fished the mountain streams, and he came up behind me that day, and that was the greatest compliment that he ever gave me. He simply said, "I never saw that cast before."
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But George took the line and he wrapped it. He did a figure eight with all that line in his hand. And the fly was, he had the leader and the line in his hand with the fly below his hand, but still fish to fish. So he could get the proper tension and the leverage in the cast. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I got to ask you, at the end of the movie, there's some outtakes. And did you really catch a beaver on a fly rod?
Yeah, I did. I was fishing in a French Creek that day and that evening, and we were nymphing, and the line stopped, and I put the hook to it, and it's what I thought was a fish just took off, and then this beaver surfaced, and he had my line.
Catch and release.
And so, he broke me off, but yeah.
Oh, he did? Oh, you didn't land him?
Yeah,
okay.
and I don't know, he was swimming underwater, and I just, for 1,001 shot, I just happened to catch him. So, yeah.
You could have had the state record beaver on a fly rod if you only landed him, Joe.
State record beaver. What happenings? Yeah.
So now the movie's been out for, 2.5 years or so. What are you noticing? Like, what impact do you think it's having on the fly fishing community?
I don't know, because I know that it's popular, and I get a lot of feedback from different people that have seen the film, and it's been very wonderful and very positive. And I don't know what effect it has, because I know it goes to it. A lot of people have seen it. When we were promoting the film, we went to different places and Sun Valley and back in Breckenridge, Colorado, and Indianapolis, and a lot of different cities, and it was well received, and I was excited about that, but. Like I tell you, Steve, I have a telephone. I don't have anything else. So I don't know what's out there. I don't know what people are doing.
That's all right.
At 92 years old, I'm saying, well, it's been a lot of fun, and I'm excited about it, but I don't know.
Let's not add anything. Okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
But, through that film, there have been a lot of happenings, and one of them was my quest for the 20-pound brown.
Right. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and so on both the White River and the Little Red in Arkansas, it's been always a dream to catch a fish that the world record came out of at one time the Little Red, which was a 40-pound brown trout. I think it was 42 inches long and 40 pounds, so many ounces, and it was just an absolute huge fish. And I saw that fish. I held that fish in my hands, and it's a mounted fish. But and then I thought, oh, this is a dream. And so I was filming with Fly Fishing America with John Barrett, and I'd hooked that huge fish, and I played it for maybe 15 minutes, and I brought it back across the river, and it was like trying to pull a railroad tie, and I finally got it back, and I got it turned around, and I was trying to lead it upstream, and the cameraman stepped in front of me, and I turned and tried to get a different angle on the fish, and the hook pulled out. And I think that if he would not have stepped in front of me and I was leading that trout, I might have let it right into the shallows and we might have gotten that trout. But that fish would have gone, I know that he would have gone probably better than 30 pounds.
Yeah.
And so I almost cried with that fish. It was just heartbreaking. And then when we were filming, and the second time I went through this experience, and we caught it on film, I'm fishing a sculpin, and a sizable black sculpin, and that's what I hooked the first fish on, and that's why I was fishing that sculpin. It's a go-to fly for me, and so I'm working the sculpin, and it was the end of the day, and we had to catch a flight, and we had to get out of there, and so it was the very end of the day, and no, I didn't catch a flight that day. It was the next day. But we had to get out of there, and because you were not permitted to fish after dark in that section of water. And so it was right on the edge of darkness, and I stuck that fish, and here again, it ran downstream, and I was excited because I figured if we can get below that fish and I can get an angle on him, I'll get him out of the business district, his home waters or wherever he was. But that fish had been hooked before, and he went straight upstream. And no matter how much pressure and no matter what angle, I had John Wilson, who is the head of Cortland, and he's been my buddy for years. So I said, John, get the boat over here, so I can get an angle on him. And then it didn't make any difference. He went straight up into a brush pile and broke me off. So that fish had been hooked before, and he knew right where to go. But that's the second time now in my life that I've hooked fish that were absolutely huge. So
wow,
I'm going back again this next year, and John Wilson is all ready for me, and we're going to do it again. So yeah,
man, I wish you luck. I hope you can get something up in that 20-pound range.
Oh, wouldn't it be just wonderful to get a 20-pound brown or better? That would be a dream come true.
Wouldn't it? Oh my goodness, Joe, you had I had read somewhere that you called fly fishing a thinking man's sport, and for all of us who do it, we could probably agree with you and give us our own stories on why that's true. But I'd like to hear from you. Why do you say that? Why is it a thinking man's sport?
Well, when you're working, let's say you're nymph fishing, and you have to think about the depth and speed of the water, and you have to figure out, well, what is my leader adjustment? Might I have to go a little longer leader and maybe lighter for deeper water? How much weight do I need? If I'm using split shot, no, I'm not. I don't worry about world competition where you have to put weight in the flies only. No, I'm adjusting not only weight in the flies, but I'm also adjusting. There's some instances where the weight in the fly is really all you really need, and you have a wonderful drift with it. But still, in deeper, faster water, you have to adjust weight. So how many split shot do I, and where do you place them? Okay, so I'll place split shot maybe 14 inches above the fly. Then I'll divide them so that they'll roll. How do you divide them? Well, they'll slide together if you don't put a little knot above each split shot so that they don't slide down the leader. And then as I'm working the water, what cast am I going to use? Am I going to use a downer and upper? Am I going to throw a longer line? Am I going to tuck the cast so that I can fish the bottom on a longer drift? So is it not a thinking man's game? Yes, it is.
Absolutely. And then also matching the hatch and all the things going on with the bug life.
Yeah, matching the hatch, yeah.
Yeah, it's once you kind of get this, under your skin or whatever, or into your blood, it's really a lifetime of learning, isn't it?
It is. And, and I think about my knowledge all of these years. And, if I start this year, the first day, I think would be like 84 years of first days. And so I have a lot of experience. But when I think of my knowledge, it's only like the tip of an iceberg. Like, what do I really know? Not very much at all.
Wow.
And what I am learning now, that with internet and so many people are fishing and they are coming up with a lot of good ideas, and particularly in the fly tying world, there are now materials that are very effective, and like glow yarn for egg patterns as an example. If I wanted to try to imitate an egg, we would try to maybe use even a kernel of corn
Oh,
on a hook, anything, we didn't know, and we didn't have the materials, we didn't have the insight that these people have today, and so it's a sport that is exploding in a way.
okay.
But still, when you come right down to it, some of the people that I'm hearing today talk about the new techniques that they're using now that are much more effective than not really. I think the Macedonians thousands of years ago
Yeah.
were doing the same damn thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right. Hey anglers, I wanted to tell you about a great online source for fly fishing gear I only recently discovered called Adventuron. A few weeks ago, I was looking for a pair of Simms mitts for an upcoming steelhead fishing trip, and after searching the web for quite some time, I found them for way less on Adventuron. Now, I'd never heard of these guys before, and honestly, I thought there's got to be some kind of a catch because they were so much less expensive than everybody else. But I decided to give them a shot, and well, lo and behold, my new Simms mitts arrived as advertised in just 3 days. Plenty of time for my steelhead fishing trip. Boy, was I impressed. Turns out Adventuron is a family-owned retailer of outdoor gear based in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. They are one of the largest authorized dealers for fly fishing gear with top brands such as Simms, Scientific Anglers, Ross, Able, Redington, and many more. And they offer free shipping and have a low price guarantee and will match any competitor's price on checkout. The cool thing is you can actually still talk to a live human being on the phone. Imagine that. Via email or chat as well. So if you want low prices and exceptional service on top brands, give Adventuron a try. That's Aventuron. And be sure to mention coupon code podcast15 to land your 15% off orders of any regularly priced fly fishing gear. That's Adventuron, your online source for fly fishing gear. Okay, so can you think of a time when you were watching another angler who you had a lot of respect for, a top-notch angler, and you thought, wow, this guy is really good. So, and I'm curious, what is it the top anglers are doing, particularly in central Pennsylvania, that sets them apart?
Well, the casting was superb, and they knew how to cover the water, and they knew, basically where the trout were basically holding.
Sure.
They knew how to really adjust to any conditions. They were flexible. If this wasn't working, then they adjusted. This I'm working downstream. I'm working a patch of water. No, it's not working. Okay, so I go downstream now. I start to work upstream, and now instead of using wet flies downstream, I'm going to nymph upstream because the wet flies just weren't working. So we've got to be flexible. We've got to adjust. And so these top guns back in those days, they were flexible. They knew how to adjust. They could do things. Yeah.
Okay, that's a great point. I'm curious, Joe, like how long do you give a fly? Like if you're out fishing, like do you give it 10 minutes, 15 minutes before you switch something out?
Well, I like if I'm starting with wet flies and like early season and I so enjoy it and but they just simply aren't coming up to wet flies. And so then, okay, so let's go down under. And what time of year is it? Okay, let's see. Oh, I'm working a patch of water, and I'm going to now. The wet flies weren't working, so I'll be nymphing. And as I'm nymphing, oh, what did I just see? I saw a fish move. Oh, there's another one move. Oh, what are they moving on? Oh, it's a blue-winged olive. Oh, I've got to stop. I've got to adjust my whole rig. I've got to put on adjust a tippet to make it viable so I can get a good slack leader cast with my little blue-winged olive.
Yeah.
And, oh, yeah, now I can catch some fish. Okay, so I have adjusted. And then the hatch seemed to be over. The fish aren't moving. So, okay, let's go under. Okay, what am I going to fish under? Okay, I'm on Spring Creek. What is prolific in Spring Creek all year round? Well, we have freshwater shrimp and crest bugs. They're there all year round. So I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to fish. Okay, let me try. I know in this area I can pick up a rock and see a myriad of crest bugs on the bottom, or I can get a handful of weed growth and find freshwater shrimp crawling within. Okay, I'm going to use one or the other. So I'll put a crest bug on, and it works. I'm doing okay, but maybe a freshwater shrimp would be better. Let me try that. Oh, I'm catching I think the action is picking up a little bit.
So you switch it up.
So this is the thought process. This is why you do things.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to adjust to the aquatic insect population. And then here's one. I'm fishing sulfurs, okay? There's a great hatch of sulfurs, and they're in the air everywhere. And they're on the water. Okay, so I am working the water with a dry fly. I'm fishing the sulfur, but I'm not doing well. But they're taking a sulfur. And why am I not doing well? Because I'm fishing a number 12 sulfur, and they're not 12 sulfurs. The sulfurs are smaller. I'm fishing a fly too big. So I adjust. Now I'm fishing a 16, and I'm catching fish.
That's simple.
So the size was the difference. So now I'm not doing so well on the sulfurs, and I don't see the fish coming up like they were. This seems like the hatch is abating, and it's not as near prolific as it was. So I go to sulfur nymphs, and now I'm nymphing, and now it's getting dark, and now it's dark, but I'm still nymphing with sulfurs. I can still see the line, and the line, anytime it stops or hesitates, I strike, and I'm into fish after fish because I'm now fishing the sulfurs after dark, and nobody thinks about that. But that's called flexibility. That's adjusting.
There you go.
That's adjusting to the food chain. It's adjusting to what's happening.
Yeah. And speaking of night fishing, you do quite a bit of night fishing, and I'd love to have you give us some thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I think that one of the things that I learned as a child, I remember I was probably 17 years old. I was in high school, my junior year, I think, and I'm fishing Upper Spring Creek, and there was a big pool at a railroad crossing, and it got dark, and I was fishing a dark Cahill wet, and I only had one fly on, just one dark Cahill wet, and it got dark, and I said, I'm going to fish this fly. And I'm going to fish it, and I'm going to see if I can catch a fish, and I'm going to stay with it. And I took a trout. I took a foot-long trout, pitch dark, on that fly, and that rang a bell.
Yeah.
that size at night they can see, and so then I had over the years nymphed at night with 12s and 14s, like my sulfur nymphs, and different nymphs at night, and it was extremely effective. I was taking fish that I couldn't touch in the daytime.
Yeah.
So it was a real eye-opener for me. And then as I got into the night fishing game, and I learned that, for instance, on some rivers, the big stoneflies come off, and I have a stonefly pattern that I use that is deadly. And then, a lot of people fish at night and they think of the mouse patterns and surface fishing, which is fun and it's exciting. But I found out lots of times that the big fish, the real heavyweights, the ones that are as long as your leg, they'll come up on occasion, but 90% of the time, if you want the real heavyweights, you go down after them.
No kidding.
And I found that my sculpin pattern, and I'll use what I call my long line, the line that was created for me by Cortland way many years ago, that it's a 22 thousandths in diameter. It's a running line. I call it the long line. No difference in diameter for the extremity of the line. And so I use that much finer line because I can go deeper faster, and I can use my sculpin on the bottom at night and fish it very slowly and very effectively. And then with the Harvey pattern and my stonefly imitations, and I work underwater, and sometimes I'll work deep, and sometimes, I'll just work under the surface. But I noticed that lots of times I'm catching bigger fish deeper and underwater. And so, these are the things.
So, Joe, if you're fishing at night, can you fish a little closer to where the fish are holding? Because
yeah, and that's another thing. You can get closer to fish at night, and they are not leader shy, and so you could use as heavy a leader as you can get away with.
Okay.
And so if I hook up a fish of a lifetime, I don't want the leader to break. That's
yeah, exactly.
That's foolhardy. Yeah, when it's not necessary.
What about light? If you flip on your flashlight for a minute, if you just put them all down, or you should use a red light?
Yeah, I fish in total darkness, but one of the things I will do, I have a flashlight that I can readily turn on and off, and I make sure, one of the things that I say that is so important, you never fish ever after night on water you don't know.
Yeah, amen to that.
You have to know the water. I know it every patch of water I fish at night, I know it in and out. I know the distance. I know, what I have to do. I know if I can wade or if I can't. I don't want to lose my life. And so it's most important that you know the water that you're on.
That's a great tip.
And then the other thing about light, and I can turn a light on briefly, like on and off. And when that light goes on and off that fast, it's a blink. And in that instance, I can see first how close I am, where I am on the water.
Sure.
I know the distance of the cast, and I know what I have to do on the other side. Are there overhanging limbs? Or is there a big patch of weed growth on the other side that I'm going to be hanging in? Do I have to adjust the cast to get under the limb? It tells me everything in a blink.
In a blink. And you can get away with that. You won't put the fish down. You can get away with a quick on.
No,
you
won't. You won't put the fish down in a blink. No. Some people are really say, "Oh, you can't do that." Yes, you can. I've caught too many fish to not know that.
What about a red light? I've heard you could use a red light and leave it on a little longer.
Red light's fine, yeah. But I can't see. At my age, I can't see as well, so I just use a flashlight. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So at some point along the way, maybe you said this in the movie or I read it somewhere, that fishing saved you as a kid. And I'm wondering if you could tell us what that's all about.
Yeah. Well, I was a bit of a problem in school. I was not any kind of a student. I got into a lot of fist fights every day almost. It was just, I was not a very happy camper because I had very little success as a student. And my parents were very concerned about it. And so they bought me the book, Ray Bergman's Just Fishing, and for a Christmas gift. And I think this was in 1942. So I got this book, and I was thrilled with it. The story that Ray Bergman told was his childhood and fishing with his friends, and then the techniques and the things that he learned as a child, and fishing with a mentor. Old Jim was the local expert, and all of these things. I was enthralled with this book, and what that book did. Now I could, as I say in the film, if the teacher asked to do a paper, yes, I could do a paper. I would do the paper on how to fish the wet fly, or the life of the brown trout, or I had something that I was excited about writing about. And then I was more attentive, and I was just, life just started to change. And I give that book credit. and that's why I always thought of Ray Bergman as a wonderful man, and his writing style. How many people did he affect? How many children did he affect in a positive manner? And with that book, I got a 10-second story. Fred Everett did the color, the artwork, and he did the photos of all the fish and the artwork of all the fish. They didn't photograph. He put the fish in a tank, and then saw them as the paintings of these fish.
Nice.
And so one evening, I had worked with a farmer. This was in August, and at haying time, and this farmer paid me a couple of bucks to help him get a couple of loads of hay in. And this was down Spring Creek. And after the day, instead of going home, I walked the stream, and I ran into this guy. And the guy was Fred Everett, the guy that did the artwork and the paintings for Just Fishing. And I was thrilled. And we sat down and talked a bit, and there was a slate drake hatch on, and fish were all over the place, and because there was nobody there. And he had a long distance to go to get back to his friend in the car. And so he fished, and I followed him as long as I could follow him. But my meeting with him and that episode, was I saw him walk in the fading light, walk away, and in the distance, and that just really caught me. And I thought, wow, how thrilling that I was that I'd never met Ray Bergman, but I did get to talk to Fred Everett. So that was an exciting situation for me. And then that slate drake that night, those fish were all over it. And the very next day, I took flies that I had, and I had an Adams. And that Adams is kind of a pretty close to the slate drake. It did imitate it to a degree. And I caught 3 trout that day in that same area where I saw Fred Everett. And I had a 10-inch brook trout and 2 other trout, brown trout, that were 11, 12 inches. And I was thrilled that
Yeah. Good night.
That was so, it all pulled together. It was such an exciting situation. I had no idea what a slate drake was, but I do now, but I didn't as a child, no. And then something else happened on that day.
Yeah, what?
That I didn't want to lose a fly, because I wasn't a good enough tyer to tie a fly that was really that effective as a child. And the flies were 15 cents each. And so if I hung up in a tree, I would do death-defying things to get that fly out of that tree. And so I learned how to get things out of anything. But on that day, on a back cast, I hooked a cow.
Oh.
And I didn't realize the cows were that close to me. And I hooked this cow, and I ran off with my fly. And I chased it as far as I could, and then it broke off, and the cow kept going. So,
oh man, that's a good story.
That was a heartbreaker for me, because I lost an Adams and a cow, and so that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Joe, I got one more question for you. Just a minute or two left here, but there's been just a bunch of people. Well, you've mentioned several on the call here today: George Harvey, Al Haig, Clyde Scheffler.
One gentleman I want to mention, a couple people, but old Clyde Scheffler, and he was in the years in very poor health, and he smoked cigarettes that he made himself. He'd like a TV Western. He'd put the tobacco in the paper and then roll it and then smoke these cigarettes. And one day he said to me, he was talking about wet flies, and he said, "How would you like to go with me wet fly fishing?" And I said, "Oh my God, yes." So he took me in a car, and we both leaned on the turns. And I think we were going maybe 25 miles an hour, but we got to the stream, and it was Spring Creek, and a patch of beautiful water, and he showed me the ins and the outs of the wet fly fishing, and
No kidding.
I was so thrilled, and it was a wonderful education, and I so respected him, and I was on the ship in the Navy on an aircraft carrier, and I got word on a letter that old Clyde had passed away, and it was a sad day for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's been so many people that you've poured into and that have poured into you. And we haven't even talked about Denny, who's the young guy that stumbled onto your property, I guess.
Yes,
and,
I have so many dear friends, and Denny is as I say, oftentimes like a son to me. And so I have a few sons. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Right. And I know your faith is important to you. And so I guess I'm just wondering, if you're tie it all together for us, what has fishing meant to you? Because it seems like everything that runs through this is fishing.
Well, God created this activity for us, and he did this for us to enjoy the beauty of his world. And there is so much beauty. And as I have said to you, Steve, the fact that you've been able to look up and see the beauty yourself and then put it on canvas as an outstanding artist. But I know that's exactly what you feel.
I do.
As I do, that the world that we fish in, there could be none more beautiful.
Yeah.
And so we want to protect it, and we want to do all we can to enjoy it as God wants us to. And so, this is what fishing is. It's a wonderful game, but it puts us closer to our maker.
Absolutely. Gosh, what a great way to end the show here. So, Joe, thank you so much for being on the show. And I've got some pictures, Joe, that your daughter sent me of your fly box and some of your flies and whatnot. And hopefully it's okay with you if we post those on our
certainly.
Facebook and Instagram page. Okay, good. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Joe, I wish you extraordinary success this coming fishing season and everything that you're doing. And folks, as always, you can email me with comments and suggestions at shaig50@gmail.com. Our music is by our Brothers Fountain. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope to see you again very soon.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.